This week, the SEC on CBS features two games between programs with no love lost for each other. One feud born long ago, and the other much more recent. In the afternoon slot, it's Georgia clashing with Auburn in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. For Auburn, the game plan might be just close your eyes, chuck it downfield, and hope for the best. After all, that strategy has worked once before.
A miracle in Jordan Hare! A miracle in Jordan Hare!
The main event starts under the lights in what is the definition of a grudge match. Last season, Jimbo Fisher became the first former assistant to beat Nick Saban when Texas A&M upset Alabama. Apparently, what really made Saban upset was when the Aggies won the recruiting race, clinching the #1 recruiting class in 2022. Alabama finished second. Back in May, Nick Saban was at an event speaking about one of the hot-button topics in college sports, name, image, and likeness. Well, Saban decided to push some buttons of his own, delivering a statement that set the sports world on fire.
A&M bought every player on their team.
Accusations that Jimbo not only strongly denied,
we never bought anybody. No rules were broken. Nothing was done wrong.
But then turned around and threw back at Saban.
Go dig into his past. You can find out anything you want to find out, what he does and how he does it. And it's despicable.
Since then, the feud has fizzled. Jimbo wants everyone to think it was just another fight between brothers.
Is that who you fight with the most? Your brothers, the people you're closest to?
Sounds like a truce.
I have no problem with Jimbo. I have no problem with Jimbo at all.
But not many are buying that. This game is also about pride. And if we've learned anything about the GOAT, he doesn't like to lose, on or off the field. So if this one just feels like it might mean a whole heck of a lot more than usual to the victor, well, that's because it will. Primetime drama in Tuscaloosa, and the entire college football world will be watching on CBS.
Welcome to CBS Sports HQ, your football happy hour. Getting you ready for week 6 in college football. Amanda Guerra, Brady Quinn, Danny Kannell here. We begin each show by going through your picks from last week. You guys, had the exact same record, I believe?
We tied. I mean, winning records, but no one likes to tie.
But I did maintain the
11
lead,
and 9.
You did. And your best bets, you've been crawling back in your best bets.
Let's go.
3 weeks in a row.
I will say you guys had 9 Lock Unity picks last week. The most, no, we're not going to talk about that, but I will say in this show there's less than half. So a way for this to differ by the end of next week.
Yeah, it'll be a shakeup.
It'll be interesting. All right, let's jump into it. Let's begin with the SEC on CBS. We're going to go through ranked versus ranked teams. We have Auburn at Georgia here. Georgia dropping to #2 after a close game against Mizzou, after a close game-ish against Kent State here. They're favored by 29.5. Danny, we'll start with you.
So,
What's are you concerned for Georgia? Like, where is your level?
No, I'm concerned, it's a big number. And this is the last time I'm going to do it, all right? So hold me to it.
You say that every week.
If Georgia doesn't cover this one, then I won't do it again. Like, it's off the table. But I'm going to say this is the get-right game coming against Auburn. It's an opponent they will not overlook. It's a rivalry game for them. Plus, Auburn kind of stinks. I mean, that's the way I look at it, is Auburn is not very good. They've had to juggle quarterbacks with injuries. Their wide receiving core might be one of the worst in the SEC. They have struggled. The coach is on the hot seat. I think the players know it. This, to me, has to be a game that Georgia comes out from the get-go very intense, very alert, very in tune, and they have to execute from the start and to the finish. They haven't played a full game in the last 2 weeks because Kent State they were not great in as well. But I think this is the game that they get right, and I don't see Auburn putting up many points. I think this will be Georgia all the way.
Well, Jalen Carter's going to be out, a D-tackle for them in this matchup. That's a huge loss for arguably maybe the top overall prospect for this upcoming year's draft. And just as far as an interior player, a guy who's as disruptive as he has been. So he's not going to be a part of it. Auburn could get TJ Finley back for this game. So something to keep an eye on here if you're rooting for War Eagle to be able to make at least, I'm not saying they're going to win this game, but at least make it competitive. Look, Georgia has not been right the past couple of weeks. In fact, Stetson Bennett hasn't been right really since that big win over South Carolina. He's struggled. And we can say whatever we want about Auburn offensively because there's been some issues there. The reality is they can still run the football. And on top of that, they play good defense. They've only given up 21 points per game on average and less than 200 yards in the passing game. So this is going to be a challenge, I think, for Stetson Bennett. He's got to be one to show out what we saw early in the season where I was looking at him saying, this guy is vastly improved. He looks like he's going to be a potential draft pick. He hasn't looked the same the past couple of weeks. So there's no doubt about it, Georgia wins. But I got to see them be able to cover this number versus another SEC opponent. And we can talk about all we want about whether or not Auburn's still fighting for their coach. The reality is they were beating LSU before LSU came back in that game last week. So I'm not going to get burnt by a big number again. I'm going to take the 29.5 points. And to like Danny's point, if I lose out on this one, then I'll just start taking the favorite now and lay all this.
You guys will flip-flop next week. All right, so Georgia now number 2 in the country. Number 1, the Alabama Crimson Tide hosting A&M. Guys, this is the game this offseason. We were all looking forward to it. You had the scuffle between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban here. A&M lost this game. Alabama lost this game last year. I don't know if we care. I mean, it's a good game.
No, this still matters.
It still matters.
I think it still matters for the reputation at this point for Texas A&M Jimbo Fisher. I mean, Danny, we were just talking about before the show. Look, you fired Kevin Sumlin, and he had the same exact record as Jimbo Fisher at the same exact amount of games at this point. And I don't think they're going to win this one. Max Johnson's got a banged-up hand. That doesn't bode well for them. They already lost Aniyah Smith. Defensively, I think they'll put up a challenge versus an Alabama offense that may be without Bryce Young in this matchup. But we saw last week, even with Jalen Milroe, they can run the football. Alabama's very capable of covering this number. So I think the safe thing is not knowing whether or not Bryce Young will play in this one. You lay the points because they're going to lean on the rushing attack and also that number 1 defense in the SEC, which is Alabama. And so I feel comfortable laying the 24 points there, especially in Tuscaloosa.
I'm with you on this one with Alabama. I think, if you listen to Nick Saban get after the media this week, I mean, they were asking about Milroe, the plan. He was very sarcastic and was like, hey, I'm going to call Jimbo and tell him. And he got irritated. Usually when he does that, he likes to send a message to his team. I guarantee you some of that irritation is unfolding with his teammates, or with his team, the guys in that locker room, reminding them of what has transpired over the last year, both losing in College Station last year and then the war of words which took place between Jimbo and Nick Saban. He is not going to take this game lightly. I think maybe a game that you would see him take his foot off the gas to get some guys out. I don't think that happens, and I don't think it matters who's playing quarterback.
I was about to say, because Brady said he doesn't really care about the Bryce Young situation. I mean,
no, I care.
Regardless,
100%.
I know you care,
Bryce Young's playing up for sure. Feel good about laying the points.
Yes, but you said even if he is not, or not knowing right now, still lay the points.
I think this number tells you that Jalen Hurts probably is playing. Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young is going to play. I think of the former Alabama, Oklahoma. I think he is playing with this number here. I mean, you heard Nick Saban also refer to it as an AC sprain. I mean, that's the best news possible. Yeah. Well, and I think they're going to roll him out there. What?
You've had those before. I've had those.
Right.
Those stink to play through. I mean, look, you're going to have to.
But you can.
You can. You got to shoot it up. You're going to have to take some of that pain away. You got inflammation in that joint. It hurts to throw. I've played through it. I've played with it. It's not fun. I can tell you that much. And if you could get by in a game like this where you might see a combination of them, honestly.
Yeah.
You might see Bryce Young out there and Jalen Milroe, maybe mixes in packages or potentially just takes over at some point too once they get up by a comfortable lead, which I think they're very capable of in this matchup.
All right, let's talk about number 8, Tennessee, at number 25, LSU. LSU has won the past 5 meetings between these two teams. However, this is a much different Tennessee team that we have seen in years past. They are favored by 2.5 in this one. Brady, what do you think?
Look, Hendon Hooker has been phenomenal, and he's the difference in this game. And bottom line is, if you look at how he's played this year so far, hasn't thrown an interception. He's been phenomenal through the air, on the ground, however you want to dice it up. And in comparison to what he's going to see across the field with Jaden Daniels, the reality is I just don't buy that they're going to be able to throw the football effectively enough to keep pace with Tennessee. And Tennessee's defense isn't a slouch, neither is LSU for that matter. I mean, this will be a challenge, but I'm willing to lay the 2.5 points with the road favorite. I don't feel great about it. Baton Rouge is a tough place to play, but I just think this is a different feeling right now for Tennessee. And even Hendon Hooker, who, Danny, we should give more love for the Heisman at this point, the way he's playing.
I think we should give more love for the Heisman. I think we should give more love for the NFL draft. And there was a lot of love for Will Levis in that loss against Ole Miss. And I like Hendon Hooker, the way he plays better. And I think his upside potential might be even more significant than Hendon Hooker, who was really thriving in this system. And I like him to go on the road here, too. This is a very fast-starting team that comes out of the gate. In the first drive, they're outscoring teams in the first quarter pretty significantly in the Josh Heupel era, and that is the best way to take the crowd out of the game is to have some success early, which I do think Tennessee does. And I'm very curious to see LSU against this team. If they do have to put up points on the board, how does Jaden Daniels do in that role as they've been a little bit more conservative? They haven't had to get into a true shootout game because I don't see any way that LSU is going to just shut down Tennessee's offense. They score against almost anybody, and I think that'll be the case, and I think LSU could struggle there.
To that point, no one's given up more sacks than LSU. And that's going to be a problem, too. If you're in a shootout and you're all of a sudden in a one-dimensional mode having to throw the football, they haven't been able to protect Jaden Daniels. They're not going to be in that instance either.
Hendon Hooker, fourth favorite, 14-1 odds to win Heisman right now. All right, we have number 11 Utah at number 18 UCLA. Utah 4-1, UCLA 5-0 for the first time since 2013, but it is the Utes favored by 4.5 on the road. Brady, what's your play?
This is such a tough game to pick. I actually, there's a lot of games you can be excited about. This might be my favorite one, and in part because you have two quarterbacks who are playing outstanding this year. DTR, UCLA, obviously, we saw the highlights from last week, just the running ability, the ability to make someone miss out in space. To me, as a passer, though, where he's really developed under Chip Kelly, and finally you're seeing, I think, what Chip Kelly's talked about all along, and the consistency to go along with that. So that's part of it. But then you look on the other side. I mean, Cam Rising has been phenomenal, too. I mean, he's no slouch in this matchup. So I'm excited to see these two guys square off because I think it could be a game that comes down to that final possession. And so because these teams are so evenly matched, and Danny, everyone talks about the Utah defense, and I get it, they're number one in the Pac-12. Guess who's number two? UCLA. I mean, they're no slouch either. So I think it's going to be a tight game, a close game. We know the crowd's not going to be an issue there in Rose Bowl, but I'll go ahead and take the 4.5 points with the home underdog.
Yeah, I mean, they had a Friday night primetime game last week, and it was like half full. It's very I don't know how you do it as a player or Chip Kelly. I'm with you on this one, Brady. I'm on the same side. I like UCLA as the home dog here. If you notice something after the game, DTR was very adamant. He was kind of going around like, this is our house. This is, we own the Pac-12. I think this UCLA team quietly has had a chip on their shoulder that has been getting bigger and bigger as the entire offseason. People picked Oregon, people picked Utah, people picked USC, and that's all we talked about was Lincoln Riley and the move there across the team, across the city. And I think this team has just been fueling the fire all offseason long. The one thing that concerns me is can they match physicality with Utah? Utah is a physical front seven team. I'm going to bank on that they do. And I think DTR is the difference in the game.
I've seen it from their defense, but you talked about that chip on the shoulder. Is it Chip Kelly? That's that.
That's
he's
right.
got a little bigger too since he's been at UCLA with that budget they have for all their meals and everything.
Yeah, you're not kidding. The little Chip Kelly on the shoulder.
I don't know if he's little.
I'm happy you guys are entertaining yourselves. This is good. This is good. A game we probably weren't going to pay any attention to at the beginning of the season. Now everybody is all about this game. Number 17 TCU at number 19 Kansas. TCU coming off their win against Oklahoma. Congratulations to them. Kansas still undefeated. Kansas underdog at home by 7 points. Danny, what do you think?
So I think in the Big 12, it's probably the most entertaining conference that's out there. And I think, outside of West Virginia, you've got a bunch of teams that are going to play really tight with one another, except for Oklahoma, who got blown out by TCU. Sorry, Amanda.
You're giggling during that.
But even
you're
that
giggling
one,
during that.
I know. I couldn't resist the jab there. But I do think this will be a game that will be tight, much like most of the games in the Big 12 we've seen unfold. And at some point, because I think people look at Kansas and they're like, this is a great story, but they're going to wake up sooner or later. A lot of people thought that last week against Iowa State. Some people thought it with an undefeated Duke team came into town. At some point, we have to acknowledge maybe this is just a good football team that is incredibly well coached with Lance Leipold. There's a reason a lot of these programs are firing coaches. I think it's to get in line for the Lance Leipold sweepstakes. They've got a quarterback who's thriving. They play great fundamental football. I'm going to say this team, I'm going to take the points at home, and I actually like them to win the game outright.
I'm not going to go that far, but I will take the points right there with you with Kansas. They've been a great story this year. Jalen Daniels has been phenomenal. You talked a lot about him. On the other side, though, let's give Sonny Dykes a lot of credit for the job he's done building back up TCU, and he's stepping in the shoes of a guy who's got a statue outside the stadium there in Fort Worth, and Gary Patterson. Not an easy job to take over and turn around and have that look the way they look so far. Max Duggan's been phenomenal this year. Still has not thrown an interception. Again, not to go back to hammer your Oklahoma Sooners there, Amanda, but
you guys are doing this
that was
on
an
purpose.
impressive.
It was big play after big
purpose
play
now.
after big play.
Big play after big play after big play.
They weren't playing much defense there. But bottom line is, I think these two teams are very evenly matched. And I'll say this. This goes back even when Kansas was struggling. For whatever reason, Lawrence, Kansas has always been an Achilles heel to TCU. Even back during the Trevon Boykin days and some of those other really good TCU teams that are battling for Big 12 championships, they struggled there. I don't know what to put to it. I think this is going to be a tight game, a close game. And I do think TCU will probably come out on the winning end. I just think overall as a team, they're a little better defensively. but I'll take the 7 points. I mean, I think these two teams are very evenly matched.
There are only a couple of hotel rooms left in Lawrence right now, and I'll tell you what, those prices
you look
are
that
just,
up? How
I
would you
did.
know
I
that?
was curious. I looked it up. I wanted to see.
What site
prices.
did you use there?
We're using hotels.com. I don't know
Okay,
if I can
maybe
say
that's-
that
maybe that's our
unless they
next
would
sponsor.
like to sponsor us for this show here. All right, I believe we are done with this ranked versus ranked teams. Let's recap what Brady and Danny have going on so far. 2 luck Unity picks thus far. Recapping them: Utah at UCLA. Both Brady and Danny say take the points with UCLA and the under there. Same with TCU at Kansas. Kansas in the over, and they both like Alabama to cover the 24 at home, even with the uncertainty about Bryce Young against the Aggies. Coming up, Ole Miss ekes out a win against Kentucky this week at Vanderbilt. We'll head to the SEC ranked games next. Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ, getting ready for Week 6 in college football, taking a look at some other ranked SEC games. We're going to get Brady and Danny's picks for these. Kentucky dropping out of the top 10, coming off its first loss of the season. Its first loss in the past 9 games for them. Wildcats hosting South Carolina this week. And Arkansas looking to bounce back after back-to-back losses for them against A&M and Alabama. Razorbacks an 8-point favorite, or excuse me, an 8-point underdog at Mississippi State. Let's bring back in Brady and Danny here. We got number 9, Ole Miss at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt an 18.5-point underdog. Look, their last game, they lost to Alabama 55-3. Before that, it was a more impressive season for them. What do you think about this game, Danny? For Vanderbilt's sake. For Vanderbilt's sake.
But I'm going to look at this from the other side. Ole Miss, they had a great
5-0, good win.
You know what happens after that?
It was a little lucky.
Oh,
though.
no.
A little lucky. They were celebrating in the Grove. You had frat boys
Little
fighting in the
hotty-toddy.
stands.
Little
Yeah,
hotty-toddy.
hotty-toddy. They're going to be feeling good. Everybody's telling them how good they are. And Vanderbilt just wants to get back on the field to get that Alabama blowout out of their system. They got a young quarterback in A.J. Swan who's pretty good. I think he'll keep this game within the number. I think this could absolutely be one of those games. Ole Miss sputters early, figures it out. It's a lower scoring affair, but then later they pick it up. Vanderbilt scores some points late to keep it within the number. So I'm going to go ahead and take Vanderbilt. Plus, I'm a good friend, my guy Bart Simmons.
Okay, so you're a good friend of Barton.
Manager.
And
Yeah.
over here during commercial breaks, you're like, I'm going to lay the points
Well,
for
he
Texas.
works for the program. You don't work for Oklahoma. You just root for them.
That is true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Give me the doors.
Braden, what do you think?
I also agree with Danny on this one. I'm going to go ahead and take the 18.5 points. Look, Vandy's coming off a bye, too. And I think they're going to be rested, well prepared. When you go back and watch that game, that was a physical game between Ole Miss and Kentucky last week. I do wonder if there's going to be some of that lingering over into this game. And you said it. You've got a team in Vanderbilt that got their doors kicked in. They want nothing more than at home, right? And Vanderbilt can be a kind of a sleepy place to go out there and try to get that taste out of their mouth. So I think they hang their hat on Ray Davis, the running back there, kind of the ground attack. Not ask A.J. Swan to do too much, but I think they can keep it within this number. And look, all they got to do is load up to stop the run. And they got to force Jackson Dart and Ole Miss to see if they can actually beat them throwing the football. They haven't been very good. This is a very different Ole Miss offense we've seen in years past. That almost reminds me of back when Lane Kiffin was at FAU. And he didn't have those types of passers at quarterback. And so it was more of that ground attack where you see guys like Devin Singletary would go off. So I think it's under's the play, I think. That's my favorite one. But I'll go ahead and take the 18.5 points here, too.
All right, on the other side of that, Kentucky coming off that loss to Ole Miss here, dropping out of the top 10 to number 13 here. We saw the finger on Will Levis's non-throwing hand, just kind of bent sideways there. Mark Stoops says, look, he's good to go. He's not going to need surgery. They're favored by 10.5 at home in this one, Danny.
I mean, he came back in the game.
All
you do is snap it right back into place.
Is that what happened? I don't know. I've never been a quarterback, nor is my finger ever been like that.
You're good to go. He'll be fine. I am worried. Again, kind of a hangover impact here. Brady talked about the physicality of that game in Oxford. That was a tough loss for Kentucky. Again, another game I could see slowish start for the Wildcats. And I do think for South Carolina, this has got to be their Super Bowl type feel for them, because as the season goes along, there aren't many wins you can chalk up. And this is a game I do think that even South Carolina looks at across the field and says, we can win that game. Now, I don't think they win this game, but I think that 10.5 hook is big for me, because I think Kentucky probably wins this game really close to 10 points, but not by more than that. So I'll take Shane Beamer's squad here playing at home.
I'm taking the 10.5 points as well. I'm concerned about Kentucky being able to protect Will Levis. I think that's one of the things that really showcased itself, and even more so than that. Chris Rodriguez comes back last week, and trying to get him going versus that Ole Miss defense never really came around. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to be hard for them to kind of get past that loss. They'll win this game, but I think it'll be a little tight than people think. I'm still waiting for Spencer Rattler to really break out. I don't know if this is that game to do it against this. Well, it has been a lot of waiting this season. I don't know if this is the game, but it's going to happen eventually. Eventually, he's going to have one of those big games where he shows out and he showcases some of that talent that he showcased during his time at Oklahoma, even though he's no longer there anymore. So I'm taking the 10.5 points here. I also think the under, I think you do too, is a good play.
We have Arkansas at number 23, Mississippi State. Arkansas has those back-to-back wins now against A&M, against Alabama there. Mississippi State, meanwhile, coming off their big win against A&M. The Bulldogs are favored by 8 at home in this one. Brady, what do you think?
Well, this one's kind of hard to handicap right now. We don't know what's going to happen with KJ Jefferson, their quarterback at Arkansas. He had a head injury is how they're describing it. He left the game, came back into the game, threw a pass. We never saw him after that point in time. And Sam Pittman's been very confidential about it. Even at practice, they're not really letting the reporters report as to what KJ Jefferson's doing out there. So at this number at 8, my advice would be do not play it at this point in time. Like, you wait. Now, Cade Fortin looks to be the backup, and he would be the guy to go in and play if indeed that takes place. He didn't look very good last week. And another interesting note to all this is Malik Hornsby. He's been listed as their number 2 on their roster. Remember, he's the quarterback who before the season, he talked about transferring, scrubbed his social media site, Danny. It's what we see all these kids do. There might be a package where if KJ Jefferson can't go, Hornsby's more of that dual threat player. He really runs a little bit more. Maybe Cade Fortin's more of that passer. But I think if you have to make a pick here, you take the 8 points because I think once they announce if KJ Jefferson's playing, that number's going to drop a little bit.
I think so too. I think like Bryce Young, the number was baked in that he's going to play for Alabama with them laying 24. I think this one tells you KJ Jefferson might not be playing, or the expectation is that he doesn't. But I still think Arkansas is a pretty good team as far as Raheem Sanders running the football. I think you're going to see a heavy dose of him. And I actually was really impressed the fight they showed against Alabama. I think defensively they might have some success against this Mississippi State offense, which not many teams in the SEC have. And I think they'll keep it within the number here.
I'll say, by the way, we got to give Will Rogers a lot of credit because he has been incredible this season. He's balling. He's doing a lot to help his draft stock too. So, we're taking the 8 points in Arkansas, but Mississippi State wins this game.
All right, let's recap what Brady and Danny have in this slate of games here. I do want to check because I had written down no lock unity, but Brady, you're taking the under as well as South Carolina and Kentucky?
Yes.
Okay, so we do have a lock unity there, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my sheet's off on this because I've got Danny too.
Either way, take the points with all the underdogs. Up next, we'll head to the Big Ten and the ACC ranked games we got coming up in Week 6, including Ohio State, Michigan, and Clemson, all big favorites on the road. Next. Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ, taking a look at Big Ten and ACC ranked games we got coming up here in Week 6. Ohio State, Michigan, big road favorites this week. Number 5, Clemson. Clemson starting to cruise, favored by 20.5 on the road at Boston College. And by the way, we'll ask Danny how he feels about Florida State coming off their first loss of the season. I don't get many digs, okay? My team is doing so poorly. I don't get many. It's not messed up. Let's go with number 3, Ohio State at Michigan State. Ohio State now leading FBS, by the way, averaging nearly 49 points per game. They're favored 25.5 on the road. Danny, we'll start with you.
So first, I'd like to congratulate the Ohio State punter for earning Special Teams Player of the Week, even though he only punted twice. Maybe a little shot, a little dig at Rutgers after that fake punt on 4th and 2 in the fourth quarter, up 49-10. The only thing I'm bothered by is he didn't get the touchdown and get the cover for the Buckeyes, who were a 40.5-point favorite. They only won by 39. So I'm mad at Ohio State. That's why I'm taking Sparty in this one. This number's too big. At some point, Mel Tucker's squad has to show an ounce of fight, and I think it comes this weekend, maybe a last gasp to salvage the season. If there was ever a chance this team was looking for something to make of the season, it would have to be against this opponent. They have been atrocious. It has been a dumpster fire for Sparty, but I'm going to say playing at home, they get their best effort, keep this inside the number.
Brady, are you
So the cover?
Are you fist bumping over
Hold
here?
on. The cover is what's going to really fire up the
Well,
Mississippi
no,
State
they're going to
Spartans.
come out. They're going to come out. They're going to get their best effort. They're going to slow down Ohio State's offense early and just hang on for dear life.
That 115th ranked pass defense for Michigan State. You know what they were last year? 130th. So we've got a little bit of improvement. But you're taking on, I would say, an Ohio State offense that is the best in the country, and a passing attack that is the best in the country. And so this is a bad matchup, bottom line. I know it's played in East Lansing. They're going to pray and hope that there's a lot of wind, a lot of bad weather, and maybe that slows down C.J. Stroud. Outside of that, I don't see Michigan State staying close in this one. Their rushing attack hasn't been close to what it was last year with Kenneth Walker, even though they brought in a couple transfer portal players who've done all right. And Ohio State's much better against the run and on defense. And I think this Ohio State team is much better than we saw last year. And Ohio State beat the doors off of Michigan State in Columbus. I don't see this one being that different unless an act of God ends up playing a case. So I'm laying the 25.5 points here. I think Ohio State scores a lot. I don't think Michigan State scores much at all.
An act of God. It's not out of the question.
It's like when your flight
Michigan
gets canceled. You know, they say, oh, do an act of God. Well, that's what happened with Michigan State.
Yeah, and you never get a refund for that, right?
No
comps or anything. No coupons. Number 4, Michigan at Indiana. Michigan favored by 22 in this one. Brady, you're going to be at the game. And during commercial break.
I am, but I want Danny to start off with this.
You want to start Danny?
Yeah.
Because we're picking the same here, and I'm really
But
curious
you also
to see what
said you
she's
didn't like picking this game.
I don't, but we'll get into that.
It's horrible. It's a trap number, I think. But I'm looking at Michigan. Physical game, on the road, at Iowa, a lot of travel, banged up. I think this, again, I think there are certain games you circle for certain programs, and it is that Super Bowl type mentality. I think you'll get the best punch from Tom Allen, and I still think J.J. McCarthy is kind of figuring his way out offensively, and Tom Allen, defensive mind, I think we'll have something that will slow down Michigan's offense somewhat to keep it inside the number. I think Michigan wins by 3 touchdowns, which scares me at 22, but I'll say the Hoosiers playing at home will keep it inside there.
I'm with you. Now, maybe for a little bit different reasons. I think it's been Michigan's very hesitant. And remember, this is back-to-back games on the road for Michigan now. They're just in Iowa City now. They go to Bloomington. They've been kind of hesitant to put too much on J.J. McCarthy's plate. And this is a defense that's going to sell out to stop the run. Blake Corum's been phenomenal the past 2 weeks. You talked about that. The problem is Indiana's pass defense is the worst in the Big Ten right now. And so if there's ever a time to open things up and let J.J. McCarthy kind of have that moment on the road, this would be that time. I just don't know if Jim Harbaugh is willing to do it. So I think Connor Basilick is going to be able to air it out versus the Michigan defense. Keep this thing close. Keep it within the number. Cam Camper's been phenomenal for IU this year as far as, catching the football and making some plays. So I'm with you. I don't really like the number, honestly. I think the under is the best play in this one. But I'll go ahead and take the 22 points here in IU.
And Danny, you like the under as well?
Yeah, we're both on that.
Wow, a little lock unity.
Yeah, lock it up.
Well, let's go with number 5, Clemson at Boston College. I think we can agree we're starting to see a lot better play from DJ Uiagalelei here. Clemson favored by 20.5 on the road. Brady, what's your play in this one?
I'm going with BC, and I'm taking the 20.5 points. Part of it is the fact that it's a road game for Clemson. It's not necessarily easy playing up there in BC. Phil Dracovic has the ability to take advantage of a secondary that struggled at times this year. They didn't last week, but they've struggled at times. Zay Flowers is one of the better players at wide receiver in the country. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal this year. If you hadn't had a chance to watch him, check out this game because you'll see he's a special talent. He's going to get drafted somewhere high. Brian Brzee will also be out for that Clemson defensive front. So even though Boston College has had its struggles this year, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're pulling off an upset, I do think they can keep this one close and within the number. So I'll go ahead and take the 20.5 points here. Low scoring game, though. I like the under as well.
I like Jeff Hafley a lot. I like the direction they had the program going in last year. This year, it's just been a little bit of a struggle. Started number 1 and 4 against the spread. They have really struggled to get things going on either side of the ball. I do worry about playing in Chestnut Hill. I mean, it is a sleepy environment. Clemson's going to have to get amped up after back-to-back games when you had magnificent crowds, you had national stage, and you had quality opponents. But I think this team is mature enough to handle it. I think DJ Uiagalelei continues to improve. This will be a game where maybe they put up some passing numbers for him and get that offense going against BC, which has been struggling on both sides of the ball.
All right, Danny, Florida State at number 14, NC State, coming off their very first loss of the season. How you feeling? How you feeling about this game? NC State favored by 3.5.
I'm nervous, but I'm cautiously optimistic for the Seminoles. I do. I think you're seeing a different team. I think you're going to get a team it's showing a lot of maturity, and last week clawing their way back into the game against Wake, which they didn't have any business winning, but at least they made it competitive towards the end. I think Jordan Travis, that was a rough game for him. I think he bounces back this game, and I think they give him the run support that he needs. But I think the Florida State defense here against Devin Leary, who has not been putting up the numbers he did last year, I think they'll be able to frustrate him, get after him, and I think they'll keep this game within that one field goal.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to last week, the NC State offense, look, they were impacted by some of the weather. That was part of it. Leary threw an interception. I think they only had like 34 yards on the ground, so credit Clemson's D. But bottom line is, it wasn't their best performance. I do think that the Florida State defense has improved. They can step up. We saw that a little bit versus Wake last week. However, they didn't really stop the run. Wake ran a little bit on them. Bottom line is, you said it, Jordan Travis, his dual threat ability, I think him, the acquisition of getting a guy like Johnny Wilson to help out with that, to me, I think it keeps this game razor tight. I don't know how far apart these two teams are. They both just suffered their first loss of the season, so we'll see how they rebound from that. But, you know, if this was 3 points, I might be on the other side with that hook. I'm willing to take the 3.5 and be on the side of Florida State.
Let's go to Wake Forest hosting Army here. Wake has won 10 of the past 11 matches between these two teams. They're favored by 17 at home. Brady, I don't know what you changed in this game. I know you changed something, so you've been going back and forth a little bit here. What's your play?
Yeah, because anytime you're playing an option team, it's really difficult to prepare for in season. Like, this is one of those games that when you're in training camp, you might devote a few days to it. And when you're in spring ball early this spring, I can promise you, Dave Clawson and Wake Forest had an entire week where their defense did nothing but prepare for this game 5 months from that point in time, 6 months from that point in time. That's how difficult it can be from time to time. The difference to me is going to be this. I think Sam Hartman and the passing game is just going to overwhelm Army. And Andre Carter is one of the better prospects at an edge position in next year's draft, and he's leading the team. He's leading Army in sacks. But look, Wake's been able to throw on pretty much everyone, and they threw on Clemson. If they can throw on Clemson, they're going to throw on Army. And I think what ends up happening here is we got an option team that gets down and has to play catch-up, and that just ain't going to happen. So I'll lay the 17 points here. I trust Hartman in this prolific offense. I do think it stays under the number, though, because of the option attack and that clock just tick, 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 tick.
I think Wake is the third game in a row, right? They had Clemson a couple weeks ago, Florida State. Now they have Army. I think this is a tough stretch for them and a very tricky opponent for all the reasons you mentioned about that triple option that you're going to see. And Jeff Monken is going to try to slow the game down. They milk the clock better than any team in the country. That's what they want to do. Shorten the game. Keep the ball away from Sam Hartman and company. I think they'll have some success doing this. These two had a wild finish last year. Remember, it was one of the most wild games of the year, high-scoring affair. Wake's defense has struggled to stop anybody, so I'm going to say Army has some success putting up points on the board against Wake Forest and keeps it within that number.
Recapping what we have from Brady and Danny in ranked games in the Big Ten and the ACC here. One lock unity pick, both say take the points with Indiana and the under there. They both like the under, and Ohio State at Michigan State and also Clemson at BC, and both like Florida State to cover the 3.5 at NC State. Coming up, we'll take a look at games in the Pac-12 and the Big 12, which I will mention does not include the OU Texas game as a ranked game. I'm a little bitter about it for the first time since 1998. There are other good games. We'll get picks for those next. Week 6 in college football, taking a look at some ranked Big 12, Pac-12 teams and games we've got coming up. USC hosting Washington State there, Oregon at Arizona. And is Oklahoma State starting to look like the best team in the Big 12 this weekend, hosting the Red Raiders in Stillwater? Why are you pointing at me?
Because we know who it ain't.
Yeah, it's not Oklahoma.
I am going to walk off this set. I'm going to walk off this set.
Is it worse to see Oklahoma State at the top, or would it be worse if it was Texas?
Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Brady Quinn, Danny Kannell, my two favorite people in the world. Washington State at number 6, USC. Washington State 4-1, USC 5-0. USC favored by 13. Danny, who are you going with?
I'm going to go with Washington State here. USC sputtered a little bit the last couple weeks. I'm at a place where I don't know if I can trust them, and this is more about the parity we're seeing in the Pac-12. I think there's a lot of good teams. I think the Pac-12 is back. We saw Washington, UCLA last week. We're seeing Oregon and Utah, USC. There's a lot of depth now in this conference, and I think Washington State is in that conversation for one of those upper tier, like upper half teams in the conference. So I think they keep it inside this number.
I'm not there yet with the Pac-12. They've got parity. We've always known that. But whether or not they have one of the top teams, that's what this game will help decide. USC, who, as you said it, in Corvallis a couple weeks ago with Oregon State, got by in a close win, sort of slowed down that passing attack. Last week, we saw it reemerge. We saw at home versus Arizona State, Caleb Williams, the rest of the crew, they dominated. And as they should versus an Arizona State team that struggled this year. Who also struggled is Washington State's pass defense. They're second worst in the Pac-12. This is a bad matchup to me. I think this is one of those games where Washington State on the road has a hard time keeping pace with this USC offense, and they end up covering this number. Now, if it was 14 and a half, I feel a little bit different, but I think they can safely cover this number versus Washington State.
We have number 12, Oregon at Arizona. Oregon favored by 13 in this one. The total is big. Right now it's sitting at 70 and a hook. Brady, what's your play in this game?
I'm going to go ahead and take the points with Arizona. I don't feel great about it because I think Oregon's been playing some really good football since that opening loss where they just laid an egg versus Georgia. They're not that same team. I mean, bottom line is Bo Nix is playing better. He's a part of the rushing attack. Their entire sophomore class of running backs has been phenomenal. Byron Cardwell might not play in this game. It doesn't matter. They've got 3 other backs that they rotate in from the same class, and they've all been really effective. And the defense is going to present an issue. That being said, I do think Arizona's passing attack with Jayden Delore, who had a phenomenal game last week, 6 touchdowns, a bunch of yards, it will test and it will challenge Oregon. This is not the same Arizona team that we saw the past 2 years where they won 1 game. They're already at 3 wins this year. It's a different feeling under Jedd Fisch. So I think in Tucson, this might be one of those games where maybe Oregon sleepwalks their way through it.
I'm with you. Jedd Fisch has done a fantastic job at Arizona. This was one of the worst programs last year. You saw vast improvement, a lot of roster turnover through the transfer portal. Jayden Delore has done a fantastic job. And I think Arizona is just a better, more competitive team this year. And Oregon traveling on the road, how does Bo Nix do taking the show on the road? I think they could see themselves possibly even in the second half looking up, maybe a tie game, maybe a field goal lead, but that 13 points is too many for me.
We have number 21, Washington at Arizona State. Washington, by the way, has scored on its first possession of every game so far this season. Keep it in mind there. They're favored by 14 in this one. Brady, what's your play?
You know, you hate sometimes those big numbers when you got a road favorite like this, but I'm going to lay the 14 points. I think Washington gets back on track here after a close game, tough loss to UCLA a week ago. This Arizona State team isn't playing for much, and we talk about bad matchups and how these two teams square off. Look, Arizona State cannot keep pace with this Washington passing attack. Michael Penix is going to test the secondary. They're going to create big plays in the passing game, maybe right from the first series of the game as we've seen throughout the season so far. But for Arizona State, that's been a work in progress at best with Emory Jones. He just has never taken that next step, and I don't think he's going to be able to versus Huskies defense. So I'll lay the 14 points here.
Kannell DeBoer and Michael Penix reuniting after spending that time together early at Indiana. It's one of the better stories of the season so far. And Penix put on a show last week with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 2 quarterbacks going toe-to-toe. I don't think Emory Jones can hang in this quarterback conversation. And I look at Arizona State as a team that has pretty much thrown in the towel in the season. Once they cleared house, they're headed in a new direction. They don't know which way it's going. I think this Arizona State program is one I don't trust to even put up a good fight. I think Washington has a big bounce back.
Texas Tech at number 7, Oklahoma State. I mentioned this. Oklahoma State starting to look very good. Maybe the best team in the Big 12. We'll wait and see there. They're favored by 9.5 at home in Stillwater. Brady.
You lay the points here. Bottom line is Spencer Sanders is having a phenomenal season, maybe a Heisman season at this point in time. And last week really showed us he's taking care of the football much better than he has in years past, especially versus Baylor. But for that matter, I think it helps them stay in this game. The difference, though, to me has been, like, Donovan Smith's been phenomenal in replace of Tyler Shuck, who got hurt earlier this season. A couple turnovers last week, though, didn't quite look as clean. And really, this game is going to come down to third down. Oklahoma State, once again, has the best third down defense in the Big 12. I think they have a hard time staying on the field and then keeping pace. That up-tempo, fast-paced Oklahoma State offense that can sling it around.
I don't know if there's any team I trust in the Big 12 to cover a 9.5-point spread. I think there's a lot of parity. We talked about it earlier in the show. Except for Oklahoma. Sorry, man, I couldn't resist. But I do think Oklahoma State is in the conversation for the strongest team in the conference. But even that being said, I think Joe McGuire has this Texas Tech team playing a lot better. I think this will be a 1-possession game late. I think Oklahoma State wins, but that number's just a little bit too big for me to trust.
This show has been a journey. This show has been a journey. Number 20, Kansas. Yes. At Iowa State here. I was talking to Chris Hassel. He's like, I am Kansas State. Kansas State. Kansas, we already talked about them. Congratulations to the Jayhawks on your great season so far. Number 20, Kansas State at Iowa State here. As I mentioned, I was talking to Chris Hassel. He said, I am done with Iowa State. Get them out of here. Kansas State favored by 2 in this one, Danny.
You know where Matt Campbell, their head coach, is awesome as an underdog? This is the spot where you load up on them. Some teams you might think may throw in the towel after a rough loss, or a couple of them here for Iowa State. But I think this is the spot they get right, especially playing against Adrian Martinez, who's been a really nice find, and Colin Klein has built a system around him. But I think in a physical, tough game, it's going to be a little bit harder for him to go off in the ground game. I think Iowa State will have some success against him, keep it close. And I actually like Iowa State to win this game out.
I am right there with you. This is that upset of the week that you're picking. Look, Kansas State's had a phenomenal 2-week run, in particular Adrian Martinez, who, look, he's been a part of the rushing attack. I want to say, 7 touchdowns on the ground over the course of the past 2 weeks. Him and Deuce Vaughn, they are tough to stop. But Ames, Iowa, tough place to play. This happens once a year with Iowa State. Someone goes, they get knocked off. It's probably going to be Kansas State in this one. So I'll take the 2 points here in Iowa State. But I think at the end of the day, the number 1 defense in the Big 12 in Iowa State, they shut down Kansas State, and they find a way of winning this one. This
is lovely. We're going to move out of the Big 12 now. We'll recap what they say is going to happen in the Big 12 and the Pac-12. Both say lay the points with Washington, take the points with Iowa State, also Arizona there. Brady saying that Iowa State game could be the upset of the week. Up next, AAC and independent ranked games. We have BYU Notre Dame facing off in Vegas. The Irish coming off a bye. Cincy favored by 28 at home against USF. Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ, getting ready for Week 6 in college football. A couple more games we're picking. We're going through all the ranked games. BYU, Notre Dame playing this weekend in Vegas. Brady, you got your Notre Dame Fighting Irish coming off a bye. Also Cincinnati, a big favorite at home, 28 against USF. So let's pick these games. You got number 16 at Notre Dame. Mentioned the game is in Vegas. Brady, speak to your Irish people here, because I have you having BYU cover. Notre Dame 3.5
points. Yeah.
Yes. So are we picking them to win outright, or can all your Irish people calm down?
Yes, all my Notre Dame fans can calm down. Notre Dame wins this game. It's going to be tight, though. This is a very good BYU team. Jaron Hall is one of the better quarterbacks in the country. This team's getting healthier, too. They got Gunnar Romney back last week. You saw his impact in the passing game. They might get Chase Roberts back for this one. Christopher Brooks has helped add a lot of balance to this offense. And, Coach Freeman, Marcus Freeman said earlier this week, when I played BYU and I was there, these guys they're talented, but they're mature. They are going to execute. A lot of them are going to be older than you. Some might have families at that point in time you're playing them. It's just a different matchup for you. For Notre Dame, look, they found their groove. 2 weeks ago, before the bye, you saw that big performance versus North Carolina. Just dominated that game physically. Tougher task versus BYU. They're a much more physical team up front. And even though they got the running game going, we got to see more from Drew Pine in this one. So I think this game's razor tight because it's that hook. I'll go ahead and take the 3.5 points here. We're in a competition, with BYU, Danny.
Yeah.
But if it's at 3 or less, I'd be on the side of Notre Dame. I think they win this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. Kalani Sitake is one of the better coaches in all of college football. He does a fantastic job, and it is a unique job that you have to manage scholarships, manage players, going on mission trips for 2 years and then getting them back. But there is an advantage to having a very mature roster, and it shows at a lot of times. And BYU could easily be undefeated if they had found a way to beat Baylor. The game was a little bit wild late. Baylor had opportunities. BYU had opportunities. Could have gone either way. This, to me, is about a couple of programs. I think it'll be a tightly played game. I think you'll see both quarterbacks play really well. That's why I like the over in this one. But 3.5, too many points here for me. I do think the travel could come into play. Is Notre Dame going early at all? Do you know? Because it is more of a local feel. I know it's not close to Utah, but it's still in the same time zone.
Yeah, I do know this. I know Bedcheck said 8 p.m. for the Notre Dame players on Friday night. So they don't want them getting into any trouble there.
You would have never gotten into trouble, though.
I would.
Not in Vegas, not at all.
Maybe a Danny Kannell in Vegas. I mean, you were in Tallahassee, a little more wild.
Talk about hangovers a lot with you. Hangover games a lot with Danny and Kannell. All right, one more game we're going to get a pick on here. We have USF at number 24, Cincinnati here. Cincinnati favored by 28 at home, Danny.
It's a big number. Don't let it scare you. USF is really struggling this season. Ben Bryant, too, by the way, for Cincinnati is doing a fantastic job taking over from where Desmond Ridder left off. Luke Fickell's squad, too, still proving to be very much in the conversation in the American. I know there's some other teams that have gotten a lot of love. UCF, Houston, they're still right where they want to be at 4-1. I'm going to say Cincinnati rolls big in this one.
Right there with you. Lay the points. They got a rushing attack, too, in Cincinnati to replace what they lost last year. Both McClellan and Kiner are good in the backfield to go along with Ben Bryant. And this USF defense, it's the worst in the AAC. They're giving up on average almost 500 yards per game and almost 40 points. I mean, it's bad. It's bad. Lay the points. If this was at USF, maybe a different feel here, but not in Cincinnati.
Big number Danny Kannell is not scared of, 28. All right, let's go to your best bet of the week, Brady. We'll start with you.
I mean, do we need to both? I mean, it's Kansas. I'm going to go ahead and
both of you are picking
all
the
the
same
momentum.
game.
We're taking the 7 points in Kansas in Lawrence. It's a different feel there. Give a lot of respect for what Lance Leipold and his staff have done, and Jalen Daniels, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I think they cover that number. I didn't say outright win, but I think they cover that number.
I wouldn't be surprised if they win. At some point, we have to start asking the question, maybe Kansas, are they just a good football team? And I'll lean toward yes, they are, until they get proven otherwise. Because every week people come in and they weren't even ranked in the top 25. Now they enter that conversation like, oh, well, the Cinderella story is going to end. Lance Leipold has this team believing. There's a ton of momentum behind the program, and they are playing at a very high level, tough, physical football. So I think this will be a fun game, and I like the points.
It's not just a good story. They are a good football team. There's no doubt.
Kansas is now a good football team. I was trying to pull up your best bet picks from what you guys have been doing so far here. But I can't tell you with this one, of course, we have Lock Unity. For your best bet, we need the confetti. We're just going to start raining it down here.
There it is.
That's what I was told to ask for. Call for the confetti a little bit early, and now we will get to your overall Lock Unity picks. Last week, you guys had 9. This week, we're going with 5. I guess, I don't know if you get extra for the best
Kansas our favorite. I like UCLA as maybe the second favorite.
They're all dogs, by the way.
Yeah.
All dogs, no favorites.
Yep.
All right.
I know.
You're ready for week 6. Brady Quinn, Danny Kannell, I'm Amanda Guerra. You guys enjoy?
More confetti.
More confetti. Always, all the confetti. We've closed the show. That's it. See ya. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.